Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Virginia Birrell, and I'm the CEO of the Australia-China Business Council in Victoria and Tasmania. It's a great pleasure to welcome you today to our Australia-China Future Battery and Electric Vehicle Forum. I will begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are holding this meeting, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and also acknowledge those from other traditional lands around Australia who may be joining us online, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and anyone here who is joining us today. It's great to see so many familiar and new faces and to host such a large contingent of online participants. I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, Victorian Minister for Climate Action, Energy and Resources and the State Electricity Commission, and also Julianne Nichols and Patrick Mayo from the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, supporting this event through the ACBC Green Channel. I would also like to acknowledge those who've flown from interstate, including some of our speakers, or internationally to be here today. It's fantastic to have Toby Graham here, who has recently been appointed as Investment Director with the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office in Shanghai. Be sure to track him down later on for a discussion. Today's half-day forum forms part of our ACBC Green Channel, highlighting and promoting collaborations between Australia and China in the decarbonisation, clean tech and green energy sectors. Following the launch of our inaugural white paper last year, the Green Channel has continued to underpin ACBC's activities and build constructive dialogue with Chinese industry. The aim of today's session is to generate practical business outcomes and contribute to a more collaborative and efficient battery and EV production for Victoria, Australia and China. Filling the knowledge gaps, promoting responsible, constructive bilateral dialogue, and now welcoming back the all-important networking aspect are the key pillars of our commitment to ACBC members. I want to thank our event host, Holding Redlich, for hosting us in their offices today and providing the lovely catering for our in-person audience. Thank you, Lou Farinotti, who unfortunately can't be here, and Scott Schlick, who you will hear from shortly. Also, special thanks to our translation partner, Chin Communications, for interpreting an exciting and high-level speech you will hear shortly. I'd like to formally welcome our large online audience and thank you for joining us eventually from interstate and overseas. While it's no easy feat continuing the hybrid event format, we want to welcome as many friends as possible in China to feel part of the ACBC Victoria while travel remains difficult. Today's event is split into two sessions to give you enough time to absorb what you will no doubt be some substantial and thought-provoking information. After our keynote presentations, we'll have two panel discussions. These are designed to be interactive to those in the room, so please be ready with questions. A reminder that an attendee pack was sent to all our guests attending today's session. It has the agenda, speaker bios, speech notes, and the guest list for those in the room. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce Scott Schlick, partner of Holding Redlich. Scott specialises in energy investment, technology and construction. He's made valuable presentations for ACBC before, and we thank him for hosting us today. After his speech, Scott will be introducing the Minister to make her presentation. Over to you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If everyone online could please just mute their microphones so we don't get any feedback coming through. Welcome everyone to the Australia-China EV and Battery Forum. Thank you for the Australia-China Business Council for organising this today. This is an important, engaging and fascinating area that we are really on the cusp of seeing boom in Australia. As mentioned, I've been involved in renewables for a number of years, since about 2008 or so. The energy industry in Australia has been through a dark age. I remember in 2012 closing the Bald Hills wind farm, spent years and years held up in environmental planning approvals because of the existence or otherwise of an orange-bellied parrot. I remember having to fly to Hamburg in about 72 hours to get a deal closed out of fear of the 2013 federal election results happening on the Saturday, the day after I came back. I remember in 2015 when the renewable energy target got reduced from 41,000 gigawatt hours to 33,000 gigawatt hours, and the pipelines of development which were emptied in this country at the time due to changes in regulatory environment. I remember the not terribly long ago comments about wind farms being dark satanic mills of the modern era. But the light has come. I don't think it's not politically expedient to query climate change at the moment, to query the immense role that energy has to deliver outcomes in this country. Even just looking at Victoria, we've had our Victorian Renewable Energy Target Auction Scheme in 2018 deliver almost a gigawatt of production. Last year, we just had the VRET 2 scheme run to auction as well. We've got legislative targets around renewables. They're not based, they're not in the 10s and the 20s. We're looking at 40% renewables by 2025, 50% by 2050. We've got targets that get us to 95% by 2035. We've got storage targets that are going to see us at 6.3 gigawatts of storage by 2035. Renewables in this country are running at around the 33% mark. These are things in those dark days I never thought we would get to, and we are a long way from being done in this country. I have the privileged position of introducing the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio to speak to everyone today. The Minister was appointed in 2022 as Climate Action, Energy and Resources, the newly formed State Electricity Commission, which I'm sure we're all aware about from the last election. And most importantly, she's been a member of the Villa Park since 2002. She is, in short, the Minister for everything dear to my heart and many of those in the room today. Minister D'Ambrosio is responsible for the $1.3 billion solar homes program aimed at helping eligible Victorians to reduce their emission and lower their energy bills. Minister D'Ambrosio was also involved in the delivery of the Victorian Big Battery, a 300 megawatt storage facility to be located in Geelong, which is not only going to provide storage but grid support and will hopefully spur a whole range of investments off the back of that facility. Minister D'Ambrosio was also responsible for the overhaul of the Environmental Protection Act, which has seen duties shift based on models focused on prevention and the passage of the Climate Change Act. Minister D'Ambrosio is also responsible for the State Electricity Commission. It's back, it will be great, it's emerging at the moment. I'm pitching to provide some advice on it at the moment, so I won't say anything more about it. I don't want to steal the Minister's thunder, so without further ado, can you please all heartily welcome Minister Lily D'Ambrosio to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Scott, for your introduction. And I'm very pleased to be here. And I do want to thank the Australia-China Business Council for the invitation. I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, and that is the land of the Wurundjeri people. And of course, my respects go to all of their elders of the past, the present, the emerging, and any who may be here from other communities joining us today. I don't want to let Chinese New Year go by without acknowledging that also, and I wish to say, and hopefully I say this respectfully and correctly, Gong Xi Fa Zai. I think that is Chinese New Year. Happy Chinese New Year to everybody. And given many participants are, of course, joining us virtually from around the country, it is important, of course, that I acknowledge traditional owners of those lands too. And of course, I wish to acknowledge Virginia Birrell, the CEO of Australia-China Business Council, Victoria and Tasmania, and Mr. Qing Ji-Yao Yu, Secretary-General of the Beijing Zhongguan Sun New Battery Technology Innovation Alliance. And in December last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Australia and China. This extraordinary milestone marked half a century of cooperation and engagement between the two countries. China is also Victoria's largest trading partner, and Chinese companies have for many years found plenty of opportunities for investment and collaboration in our state. For instance, Sungrow Renewable Energy is a Chinese company that was successful in last year's VRET auction, VRET2 auction, which Scott referred to earlier, with the Derby Solar Project, a 95 megawatt solar farm with 85 megawatts of battery storage, to be located in Derby near Bendigo. And today I'm going to talk about the targets that we've set as a government and the policy settings that have made Victoria one of the leading destinations for renewable energy investment in the Southern Hemisphere. And I'll also want to discuss some of the exciting initiatives and programs that have made our state the national leader in both battery energy storage and electric vehicles. Over the last 8 years, our state has established itself as a leader nationally and around the world in the development of clean energy. And Scott did refer to some very dark periods of time. I would say to you that that Victoria was the only shining light, I think, during those dark periods. But now, of course, there's a new dawning, and many other states and, of course, nationally are on the same path, which is wonderful. We set here in Victoria a goal of achieving 65% renewable electricity generation in Victoria by 2030 and 95% by 2035. And in effect, that 95% target counts for no more coal-fired generation in Victoria. Our emissions reduction targets of 75 to 80% below 2005 levels by 2035 and bringing forward our net zero targets from 2050 to 2045 are one of the most ambitious in the world and are delivering the fast rate of decarbonisation in Australia. When people consider Victoria and the heavy reliance that we've had on a very heavily carbonised energy system around coal and fossil gas, the task for Victoria has been that much greater than in any other state. So I'd like us to reflect on that because we never shy away from challenges. And we do that knowing all the while that we have to be constructive and productive and capture the opportunities for our state so that there is absolutely a net positive in the move towards a decarbonised energy system at the rate that we are doing it. And last year we announced ambitious energy storage targets, at least 2.6 gigawatts of energy storage capacity in Victoria by 2030 and at least 6.3 gigawatts by 2035. Our energy storage targets further cemented Victoria's leadership in the rapidly evolving battery and energy storage sector, which is what I want to address next. There are three broad categories of battery technology that are currently a focus for commercial investment in Victoria. Large utility scale batteries, neighbourhood scale batteries and microgrids, and household level batteries owned by homes and businesses. At the utility scale level, our active big batteries include the 300 megawatt Victorian Big Battery, the largest lithium-ion battery in the Southern Hemisphere, the 30 megawatt battery at Warren Heap in Ballarat, the 25 megawatt battery at the Gunnewarra Solar Farm, and the 20 megawatt battery included in the Bulgana Green Power Hub. All of these batteries were only able to eventuate with strategic government involvement and encouragement, and the market responded. Among the big batteries we have in the pipeline is a 100 megawatt battery and grid forming inverter in Turan, funded through our government's Energy Innovation Fund. Very, very exciting grid forming inverter. A 125 megawatt lithium ion big battery with grid forming inverters, again, in the Murray Renewable Energy Zone, which will be funded by a $119 million grant from the Renewable Energy Zone Fund. And that is money that is effectively a catalyst for these technologies to be able to come in. 4 batteries totaling 365 megawatts under the recently announced Victorian Renewable Energy Target auction. So it is no wonder that Victoria was and remains the home of big batteries in Australia. We also showed great leadership in neighbourhood scale batteries. We've committed to building 100 neighbourhood batteries across Victoria, tripling the number of homes with access to a battery, driving down electricity bills and providing crucial extra storage capacity for local communities. And we've already provided nearly $11 million via the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative to explore the potential of this technology for our transitioning electricity system and implement projects that benefit Victorian energy users. The first 2 rounds of the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative have delivered 13 feasibility studies and 5 battery implementation projects. Applications for round 3 of the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative will be opened shortly. And we're bringing the benefits of microgrids to Victorians, particularly those in rural and regional areas, through our $10 million Microgrid Demonstration Initiative grant program and $9.85 million Community Microgrids and Sustainable Energy program. And I think it's important to also note that we are seeing these technologies as helpful to provide greater resilience in rural and regional communities that are subject to extreme weather events. And Victoria again is leading the utilisation and deployment of these technologies for resilience purposes in the light of climate change and its increased impact on our weather patterns and extreme weather events. And finally, at the household level, the Solar Homes program has already helped more than 11,700 Victorian households install their own batteries to maximise the benefits of rooftop solar. But of course, when it comes to batteries, the largest battery that most Victorian households will own in the next decade is likely to be the battery in their electric vehicle. And with Victoria's transport sector accounting for about 25% of our state's annual greenhouse gas emissions, electric vehicles have great potential to help us achieve our target of net zero emissions by 2045. Our commitment to supporting the uptake of ZEVs in Victoria also means our state hosts great opportunities for investment. We've already announced the goal that half of all new light vehicle sales in Victoria will be ZEVs by 2030, leading to an estimated 1 million ZEVs on the road by that date. The Victorian Government ZEV roadmap outlines how we will achieve these targets and ensure Victoria is a leader in the adoption of ZEVs in Australia. The roadmap is supported by a $100 million package of policies and programs, including $46 million towards the Australian First ZEV subsidy program that has been taken up by more than 6,500 Victorians since it was introduced in May in 2021. Nearly $20 million to accelerate the rollout of charging infrastructure across regional and metropolitan Victoria and support the charging of EV fleets through the Acceleration of Zero Emissions Vehicles Adoption Program. $20 million has also been invested for a zero emissions bus trial to support our targeted transition of 100% of new public transport buses to ZEV from 2025, and $5 million for a fund to accelerate the uptake of ZEV technology in commercial settings, including the commercial passenger vehicle, freight and infrastructure industries, and $10 million towards the replacement of 400 vehicles in the Victorian Government fleet with ZEVs by 2023. The roadmap also highlights priority areas for advocacy at a national level, including the need for the introduction of national vehicle emissions and efficiency standards and a national approach to grid integration. We need a system that sings in a way that is smooth and seamless, but there's a lot of work to make that happen and a lot of balls in the air. But that is absolutely something that we're up for here in Victoria, and we're actually leading the way in touching on all of those key policy areas that need change, that need adjustment to ensure that we have a system that is absolutely ready for the increase in uptake of battery technologies and ZEVs. Victoria welcomes international investors and companies with battery and ZEV technologies and expertise. I can assure you that you will find our state an open and a rewarding place to do business. Finally, I wish to again thank the Australia-China Business Council for your invitation and for your tireless efforts to cultivate and strengthen the economic ties between our two countries. I also want to acknowledge the ACBC's Green Channel initiative, which holds great promise as a way to identify and support net zero collaboration opportunities in Australia and China. EVs and battery storage promise to be areas of exponential growth over the coming decade and beyond. And with Victoria leading the nation in its commitment to these sectors, I'm very confident that investors will find our state rich with opportunities for collaboration. So I invite you to join us on Victoria's electric vehicle and battery storage journey. And thank you once again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Minister D'Ambrosio. It's an important sign of the importance that the Victorian Government places on this sector that you've kindly joined us today. Thank you for providing us such valuable information on targets and policy settings. Like you, we never shy away from challenges, and so let's keep working together to achieve those wonderful targets. I understand you do have a busy schedule. Then you may need to leave, so please excuse yourself whenever you need to. Thank you again. I now have the pleasure of introducing a keynote presentation from Mr. Yu Qingyao. Mr. Yu is the founding Secretary General of Beijing Zhongguancun New Battery Technology Innovation Alliance, Executive Chair of the National Industry Peak Body China Battery 100 Association, and founder and chairman of a number of leading new battery industry-focused multimedia portals. We are thrilled to have such a high-level industry leader present to us today, and we look forward to deepening the bilateral relationship further with him in the near future. As a pre-eminent industry expert, Mr. Yu also serves as special counsel to many other provincial and municipal level governments in China on new energy transition. Today, Mr. Yu will deliver a comprehensive update on the current status of China's new energy vehicle market, energy storage and battery production. There is a lot of valuable data in his speech, so we have included a translated copy in your attendee pack. Thank you to Australia's Adam Bull for helping us establish this relationship. I now pass over to Mr. Yu. Thank you.
尊敬的各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们，大家好，我是来自中国电池委员会的于清教，非常高兴地通过线上的方式来参加珍奥未来电池和新能源车的论坛。首先，对主办方的邀请表示真心的感谢，同时也预祝本次论坛圆满成功。受主办方的委托，下面我简要介绍一下目前中国以及全球电池新能源行业发展的现状，并分享一些我个人对行业的看法。大家都知道，中国已成为全球最大的新能源车市场，产销量连续8年位居全球第一。蒸汽协的最新数据显示，2022年中国新能源车持续爆发式增长，产销分别完成705.8万辆和688.7万辆，同增96.9%和93.4%。那市场的占有率也达到了25.6%，提前完成了2025年市场渗透率达到20%的目标。公安部的一份数据显示，截止到2022年年底，中国新能源车的保有量达到了1310万辆，占汽车总量的4.1%。其中，2022年新注册登记的新能源车535万辆，占新注册登记的总量的23.05%。从全球来看，那我们中国电池的一个新能源的一个研究机构EV-Tank的数据，那么也给我们显示，2022年全球新能源车销量达到了1082.4万辆，同比增长61.6%。销量的主要贡献来自于中国。2022年，中国新能源车的销量达到了688.4万辆，在全球的比重增长到63.6%，而2021年这个数据呢，仅为53%。 不仅仅是新能源车方面，那么在锂电池方面呢，中国市场的出货量也长期占据全球约60%的市场份额。最新的数据显示，2022年全球锂电池整体出货量达到了957.7吉瓦时，同比增长70.3%。其中，2022年中国锂电池出货量那么达到了60.8吉瓦时，同比增长97.7%。在全球锂电池整体出货量的占比提升到了69%。而在2021年呢，中国锂电池出货量在全球的占比为59.4%。从产品的出货结构来看，2022年全球汽车动力电池出货量为684.2吉瓦时，同增84.4%。储能电池的出货量159.3吉瓦时，那同比增长了140.3%。小型电池的出货量呢，这个小型电池主要是指这个3C 一类的，达到了114.2吉瓦时，同比下滑了8.8%。可以看到，除新能源车动力电池外，储能电池那么也是我们锂电池市场应用中极具潜力的一块增量市场。2022年，它的出货量呢增速已经超过了动力电池，在出货量方面也超越了小型电池。储能电池的应用前景，那么大家都知道非常广阔。这2年的发展速度也证明了储能电池的潜力所在。那么储能电池呢，我们大致可以分为这么几种：第一是电力储能，第二呢是家庭储能，第三是通讯基站储能，第四是便携式储能。那么这么多的应用的细分的场景。那我们还有一份数据，就是我们中国电池新能源行业的媒体，我们中国电视网的部门项统计，2022年400多个项目啊，新能源产业的投资，其中300多个公布了投资金额，投资总金额超过了2万亿元。那其中呢，统计在内的107个锂电池生产制造项目中，89个公布了投资金额，投资总额超过了9054亿元；86个项目公布了产能，总产能规划超过了2.18吉瓦时。随着下游市场需求的快速扩容，锂电池等项目的投资扩产持续高热。其中呢，我们的上游资源锂矿、镍矿、钴矿等，它的资源的重要性那熠熠凸显。目前，全球锂资源的主要来源于西澳的锂矿和南美的盐湖。其中，澳大利亚那是我们全球最大的页岩型锂资源生产和出口国，同时呢，澳大利亚呢也是我们全球最大的锂资源供应国。那近几年来呢，特别是2021年以来，由于矿石资源禀赋的优异，那么澳大利亚呢锂资源的产量一直在全球居于首位。我们都知道，中国是全球的第1大锂盐生产国和制造国和消费国，锂资源的储量虽然较为丰富，但是呢，由于受地理环境、气候的变化，那么的开采难度比较大。目前呢，主要依赖进口，其中在锂金矿方面呢，主要进口于澳大利亚，那么占比呢达到了90%左右。因为大家的统计数据不一样，这个90%呢，我取了个大约比较准确的中间值。那么近年来呢，为了满足动力电池、储能电池等生产和市场的需要，那么我们中国呢正适度地加快国内锂资源的开发进度，并着力发展电池的回收产业，来拓宽锂资源渠道。但中国新增锂资源项目投产，我个人觉得还需要时间，并且电池的回收的规模还比较小，因此一段时间内来，锂金矿仍需要依靠进口。来自我们中国有色金属工业协会锂业分会的一个数据显示，据中国海关统计，2022年中国锂金矿的总进口量达到了284万吨，那主要来自于以下几个国家，一个是澳大利亚，第二巴西，第三是津巴布韦，第四是加拿大。那同比增长了42%。其中 2022年，中国从澳大利亚呢就进口了262.5万吨的锂金矿。那么在我们中国总进口量中，我这锂金矿达到了92%。2022年来，由于我们下游电池市场需求的旺盛，导致上游原材料供应偏紧，那么供需的这个错配呢，导致了中国电池级碳酸锂价格大幅上涨。2022年初，电池级碳酸锂呢约28万一吨，那同年3月份呢，快速上升到50万一吨。那么随后呢，一直在高位震荡，并在去年10月份左右一举突破了60万元一吨。那12月份以后呢，由于受相关的影响价格出现了回落，但是目前为止依旧维持在45万到50万一吨的这么一个高位震荡。进入2023年，电池级碳酸锂的市场价格呈现了一个下行的趋势。那个主要我觉得除了我们中国的春节大家企业的这个设备检修以外呢，还是主要因为过去2年来我们的市场增长过快，市场需求那么也存在一定的虚高。那所以我们年初这个需求的降温了，那么也导致了碳酸锂的回落。那么大家也看到了，那么我们国家更新部等部门呢，也为了加强锂资源的管理严查锂电池上下游产业链，那么囤积居奇横抬价格这么的行为，那么为了给锂价格降温，目的还是维护行业健康的生态发展。我个人预计，2023年碳酸锂的价格的下行是个趋势，但你想回到几万元、10几万元一吨，几乎不可能。为什么呢？因为现在我们整个拿矿的成本和开采生产的周期决定了我们的矿产的量能的释放不是在某一个月或者某一个季度突然的释放。那么2003年来，我个人还是有这么一个预判，大概率会维持在30万到40万这么一吨的这么一个价格当然有可能习惯性的上升，但是大幅下跌的可能性我个人认为不大。为什么呢？现在全球这个疫情的过去现在导致我们的很多的扩产动作那么也在加速。虽然碳酸锂的价格会有所下行，但在全球减碳特别是碳达峰和碳中和这么一个大的历史背景下，新能源赛道呢，我个人是坚定的看好，认为是一个持续的高景气赛道。我们的锂钴镍等关键矿产资源的战略价值依旧不减。2023年来我们中国现在延续了13年的新能源车国补的政策，那么也就正式的退出了历史舞台。但是其他的促消费、旺市场的持续政策，那么正在落地。那么刚刚过去的2月3号，我们更新部和交通部等8个部门在全国范围内启动了公共领域车辆全面电动化的试点。那么这个政策的实施会有望加速我们商用车、专用车和公交车的全面电动化进程。还有，那我们中国新型的储能领域的顶层设计呢，就是“十四五”新型能源这个新型储能发展的实施方案呢，已经在2022年印发了。那相信在政策的力挺下，2023年储能领域有望实现或者延续高增长的市场发展态势。有了新能源车、储能等下游市场需求的支撑，叠加中国企业出海市场的步伐的加速，我预计在乐观的情况下，2023年中国锂电池的出货量将迈入7瓦时时代。2025年全球的锂电池出货量预计超过2.7瓦时。那么2023年中国新能源车的产销量预计将突破900万辆，甚至冲击1000万的目标。综合以上各种因素我因为在这样一个大的历史背景下和行业发展趋势下锂资源的战略地位不言而喻。同时我也期待中澳两国能够双方深化合作，同品共赢，尤其是在材料、电池、电动汽车等领域携手实现绿色发展，赋能全球。最后祝大家 兔年身体健康，事业繁盛，心想事成。谢谢。
Thank you to Mr. Yu. We certainly appreciate his presentation and certainly hope that we can work together in the near future. And as he said, let's join hands to achieve green development and empower the world. What a great call. So thank you for that. I'm now delighted to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Peter Hansford. Peter will be known to you, to many of you, due to his work in business development. Peter will be known to many of you due to his work in business development in new energy technologies for the Victorian Government and his current role as Head of Beacon Energy Networks at Deakin University. Peter has worked for 20 years in food and agribusiness and 12 years in clean tech and renewable energy. He is a long-standing member and valued supporter of ACBC Victoria. I'm now delighted to welcome Peter to the microphone to give a short presentation, following which he will introduce our speakers and moderate the first panel discussion. Thanks, Peter.
Well, thank you everybody for coming today. Thanks to the ACBC for inviting me along. I am indeed happy when it comes to the potential for batteries in Australia. It's probably what landed me this job to some extent, because I know what we made in Maria Forsyth, who many of you may know, is world-renowned magnetic material scientist. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which we meet. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. We meet today on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We recognise their ongoing connection to the land and water, and that this connection has been ceded. Okay, so just quickly a word about Deakin, maybe not seen by many as the go-to university, but in my short period of time there since August last year, I am absolutely amazed at the assets and the talent in the energy space across all sectors. We also have some amazing assets like in battery research, in hydrogen mobility, 7.5 megawatt microgrid at Warren Ponds, one of the largest IT departments in Australia, specialising on machine learning and artificial intelligence. Deakin was born, of course, out of Burwood, built on the teacher training facility out there, and education is still very strong. And social licence is something that we're also excellent at. So I obviously grabbed this slide from AEMO, looking at their step change scenario through 2050. And you can see that there is, as the Minister was outlining, an enormous amount of change coming in the energy sector, an enormous amount of activity required, an enormous amount of investment. But the headline number for me is that the storage capacity needs to grow 30-fold between now and 2050 if we're to achieve the Australian target at zero by 2050. Batteries are, quite simply in my mind, the cornerstone of the energy revolution in various forms. At the grid scale, as we heard, the community scale, at the household level, but also across manufacturing, transport, agriculture. There will not be a sector that's not touched by batteries. And as the market matures, it's my belief that the chemistries will change over time. The formats will change over time. We will start to see batteries that are fit for purpose, designed for particular functions, whether that requires energy density, number of cycles, longevity, recyclability, all of these factors will come into play within the next 10 years. And so Deakin, with its battery hub and its capacity to actually assemble batteries from different chemistries using different anodes, cathodes, electrolysis, separators, and then actually test those batteries for their efficacy and for their safety will be a great asset for the nation. The future battery industry CRC represents, I guess, the academic research in this space at the moment. It's headquartered in WA, but it includes lots of people from across the country, including formerly at least Joe Staines from University of Melbourne, who you'll hear from a little bit later. As you can see from that graphic, one of the things that is missing in Australia is cell manufacturing. And we heard from our guest speaker in China of the volumes of materials that are dug out of the ground, minimally processed and put on a boat and sent overseas, not just to China, but increasingly to other markets where battery cell manufacturing is ramping up. And there are last estimate at least 180 gigafactories, battery gigafactories under construction or in operation at the moment. 180. So, according to Shannon O'Rourke from the Future Battery Energy CRC, the world hasn't seen and will never see another opportunity quite like batteries. Australia is one of the world's biggest owners of the so-called critical minerals and metals that go into EVs and batteries that power them. It already, as you heard, is top producer of lithium and amongst the biggest producers of nickel, cobalt, manganese and rare earths. The International Energy Agency estimates that demand for EV batteries will grow more than tenfold this decade. Rather than just digging up the materials and watching others get rich with them, Shannon O'Rourke from the Future Battery Energy CRC says, Australia should drive down the dawn of the new industry further up. The other needs of government, state government, no surprise, also now cotton on to the fact that this is a great opportunity for Australia. So it's quite timely that we're talking about batteries today. And so, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first panellists to the stage. Jason, Juan, thanks, Kavanagh, and Joe Staines. Thanks. I'm going to stay here, if that's okay. Yeah, right. So we've got two panel sessions. You'll probably get sick of me by the end of the day. I think the gig that I've now got is a little bit bigger than I thought it would be initially, but nevertheless, we've got some great panelists to make sure that we get formed. So I'm not going to read through the but I'm going to start to tell us a bit about NMG and the impact of carbon on the mining sector.
So, first of all, just give me a crown back. Right, thank you for Virginia for the presentation. Is the base, I think you will explain the paper for the last 3 years. For me, I'm a believer in else, we have to elect myself sometimes. And but you're not a chemist. About MMG, so we are a mid-tier mining company, so we're not actually sure we're tinfoil, so we're we'll say, also in South America, Africa as well. So we cover copper, zinc, lead, and some of the byproducts. So one of the unique DNA that MMG always has, that we have a what we call a recap, our major shareholder, China Metals, has been our majority shareholder within the business and supporting us not only to treat MMG as international mining platform for Minot, but also as a channel between Australia and China. So with the current footprint, Melbourne is our head office, and we operate 2 operations, one in Queensland, one in Tasmania. And Peru, it's one of the largest copper deposit production. And right now, everyone knows the story about Peru, so we're in a struggling moment due to the political issues. And another asset sits in DRC, and so that's copper concentrate cathode. And we are extending that project into cobalt and cathode. So that's a bit about our sort of business overall. About the question that you're asking about decarbonisation, so I guess from our business point of view, in an upstream business level, it's 2 areas we think about. One is our producer. So we mentioned the critical minerals. We basically produce copper and zinc. That's sort of attributing to important elements to treat and vehicles. At the same time, our business strategy is to improve our operation to be more sustainable and to attribute to be more green energy. So, example like in the DRC, so we started our what we call Kinsevere, which is our operations in expansion project. So that covers the cobalt, which we are doing the Q4 this year, and attributing to green energy space for Dougal River in Australia. So all of these elements helping us to actually become more sustainable environment for the global mining community. And also for internal growth point of view, so we are a member of ACMM, sitting together with Rio Tinto and BHP, all the big mining players. So we want to achieve low carbon in the future as well. So by doing so, we introduce our renewable energy approach for the river and the hydropower generate gas for our roastery in Tasmania to help with the planet to be more cleaner or better. So I think in a nutshell, that's sort of how we see from a mining perspective in decarbonisation.
So I'm not going to let you get away that easily. Can you talk about some of the specific initiatives that you might be taking at the mines themselves, in terms of whether it's electrification or whether it's offsetting? We heard about what's happening in Tasmania, but what about generally?
Okay, I have to use the example here for our Dougal River operation in Queensland. So we have currently a running deposit commissioned in 2017. The deposit sits in 65 kilometres away from Concari. We've got 1,000 kilometres away from Transport Port. It's a very remote area. So as you would imagine, about the cost of the gas nowadays is really up to the friends. What we have done back in 2020 is the whole strategic move, the pathway for new energy. So we started with solar. So now, hopefully, by this month, so we're commissioning solar generate power for our operation, followed by the wind. This is where we're starting on the wind farm. And what that means, so the whole solar energy will be about 33% our electricity consumption overall. When we add the wind in the whole spectrum, so that will reduce further 40% of the whole electricity consumption for the operation. Battery is one of the things we have been looking and considering. However, as what Minister mentioned about all the great connectivity in different states and jurisdictions and regulations, it has added quite a few challenges to the operator. So, as we're all aware of, the process taking from R1 or DPS starting with to modeling, simulation modeling. So that would take such a long time. And when we put up this case, we sometimes have to draw down how actually is the footprint into the battery side. So for now, we're sort of past the best system on the side at the moment. Let's focus on the wind for now, but it doesn't mean that we will stop considering battery in the future.
Thanks very much. So we're going to turn now to Kate, who comes from CSIRO and is the team leader for transport electrification. And I'm going to, maybe it's a curveball, a bit broader than just transport. So what do you see the opportunities for electrification and particularly batteries in manufacturing generally, if we can go down that path?
So I am team leader for transport electrification, but as you said, it's more broad. I co-lead a large program of work that's in development at the moment, looking at the entire supply chain of renewable energy infrastructure in Australia, and particularly for energy storage and batteries. So we have expertise in the mineral resources, so to kind of extend the entire supply chain from the ground to the minerals, looking at the manufacture of batteries in particular. We have research looking at the anodes, cathodes, and the specific application and needs of those devices. But then also downstream, I'm particularly interested in integration of batteries and integration of renewables to our grid. So we have quite extensive facilities in Newcastle in New South Wales, where we look at the integration of renewable energy into the grid, and that also includes electric vehicles. There's a lot of talk and I'm sure in the next session we'll look at the grid and how we manage that as it's coming. But in the first instance, it will be vehicle to home or vehicle to building. We have a large battery storage or electric storage on wheels driving into your home, but also to work, to supermarkets, to apartment buildings, and looking at the infrastructure needed to support that transition. And I'll say it's a transition, but it's really a transformation of our energy system, because it's new, it's big, and as was mentioned before, and Peter kindly put up the AEMO slide, it's a lot of storage that we're going to need moving forward, and it's almost inconceivable how it is. And those figures that you put up, that's a conservative estimate, really. So it's the step change scenario. It's not progressive change, and it's not a hydrogen superpower change scenario. It's a step change. So really, we're aiming further than that.
Thank you very much. We might, in the interest of bringing Joe into the conversation, carry on that line of thought though. Joe has been involved in the ridge batteries and CRC, and we've heard from the mining sector and Kate as a posse for the manufacturing sector. So where does Australia fit, do you think? Are these dreams of establishing a battery manufacturing capability in Australia, are they real from your point of view? It doesn't have to be an FDIC view. doesn't have to be a uni knob view, it could be a Josephine view. But, yeah, I'm interested in your take on whether Shannon O'Rourke from the future battery industry CRC is overblowing it.
It's super dangerous, allowing me to have my own view. So my background, just to put a little bit of context before I go to the question, 20 plus years in manufacturing in Australia, in probably a pretty unlikely industry being aerospace. And I've been with the university for 5 years and started a Master of Industrial Engineering because industry wanted that. And we're starting to find graduates becoming interested in it. It's been a bit of a sell job in Australia because it's not a well-known discipline, but even though it's very well known in other parts of the world. But that's a great opportunity, you know, developing a new degree, thinking about what industry needs, not just today, but in the future, and really has allowed us to address sustainability and things like that, life cycle. And that's also where we were involved in still involved in the future battery industry CRC, and I remain a cheerleader for FBI CRC, so there's no stepping away from that. The University of Melbourne programs are super innovative with CSIRO and others. Also in the life cycle assessment and provenance areas. I really believe in what future battery industry CRC set out to do long across, you know, many sectors of just don't believe we should be digging up and sending stuff overseas. There has to be more value in Australia, retained in Australia, better jobs retained in Australia. And I think the world imperatives is going to make us do that. Like if you look at the ESG kind of focus, so environment, social and governance, and the investment community, you know, first came out of the IPA first, where it came out of the UK, really putting some of those lenses over where money's going to flow. It really, and consumers are becoming more enabled and more aware of where their products came from and what they were made with, or, you know, the whole story about it. And I think that does give us opportunities in Australia to can't take it for granted that we produce things more ethically than others. You've got to prove it, and some of the data may not set us as free as much as we might like it to. But instead of hiding it, put it up there and say, here are the places that we've got to focus to do better. And, you know, I'm a big sustainability advocate. My generation's the one that's used way beyond its fair share of everything, I reckon. So it's really gratifying to see the students coming through the tertiary system so much more aware of their footprint in lots of ways. They've got a few little blind spots, but, you know, in general, they're much more aware. And we can really canvass and corral the energy of this next generation to make a really big change. But you can't just focus on one bit, and I think that's probably a bit of a challenge for us all, because I was speaking to somebody before we started, it's a wicked problem. You know, you've really got to look at how you design the batteries. You know, they've got to be designed with the end of life in mind. We've got to get more efficient, we've got to get better yields, we've got to have less waste, we've got to use less resources, not just the stuff in the ground, the energy, the water, everything. So I think those are the big challenges, but absolutely I believe we can fill some of those gaps on Shannon's diagram. We're not going to rival China in being mass producers at lowest cost. And, you know, I don't really believe China's going to be lowest cost for a lot longer because lifestyle is catching up and things like that too. We've all got to get smarter. The human resources, but all the other resources go into what we make and consume, but Australia can have part of it.
Well, I'm going to take that as a yes. So part of the challenge then is obviously the how, and there's a lot of investment targeted at the battery sector, including by governments, including by our national government. But I wanted to go to the issue of provenance that you were talking about and speak to a miner as to the impact currently or in the future about the whole battery supply chain and how important it's going to be able to identify where your inputs come from and how they are created and delivered. So Jason, you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, sure. I guess from the miner point of view,
Yeah.
we don't really care where it comes from. So of course, good, reliable, and low cost. Good jobs coming through around whether we roll China or how the manufacturing facility or infrastructure work in the future. As MNG, so we had leverage working with our major shareholder in China to assist the market. That we do benefit on the synergies. So it's not about one or the other. It's like how we work together for a better future. So example like we're looking at all the new energies and e-vehicles I was going to mention about. So we are now trialing electric vehicles for service at our Tasmanian operation. So it is a long journey. And particularly for miners, you know, for us, safety is always a top priority for the business. And we treat every single line on it. So we will make sure that the vehicle drive, either on the surface and the ground, are safe, are reliable. So that's our first priority for the business. So given to that end, so as I feel great, it is a long journey. It's not like something like happening tomorrow. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Kate, picking up on something else that Joe said, and thinking about your experience in the manufacturing sector, I just want your take on what is it that what's the strengths, what the weaknesses when it comes to looking at battery manufacturing or more downstream processing of the key ingredients, and what's CSIRO's role in that?
Yeah, as I said, or alluded to, CSIRO is quite unique because we have multidisciplinary and we actually can produce the valuable research along the supply chain from mineral resources in the manufacturing and then into integration and the end user. I think as a transformation, we traditionally have based our exports and our country on coal, but with the traditional coal-fired power stations shutting down, where are they moving? They're moving towards renewable energy, and there's a lot to do in the transformation or the transition as we move forward. So I think focusing our efforts on the here and now, and batteries are the here and now. There is talk of hydrogen is coming down the road, and that is a part of the conversation. But batteries are here now, and we need them to be sustainable.
So, Joe, you started the conversation off a bit about the recyclability and sustainability of batteries. What sort of things does that entail other than being more careful, perhaps, and greener in the extraction and processing? But what about different chemistries, or if it's not a strong suit, you can just make general statements. But do you see that there's going to be room for a fractioning of the battery market, and what are some of the niches perhaps that Australia could look at penetrating?
There's kind of two questions in there, so I'll go for the recycle reuse one, and I think I certainly can't speak for China's situation in that part, but for Australia, that's and we did some work with CSIRO a couple of years ago, and I think it still pretty much holds. The quantities are low, the chemistries are all over the place. The collection is getting better, and our governments haven't been super keen to put targets on their collections, but now we've got the battery stewardship scheme is stood up. But it's a really tough gig for those guys. So all that's really happening in Australia is you have collection, you have some recyclers who are basically, I'm a very technical person, they're basically munching up the batteries, doing some gravity separation of plastics and other stuff. And the good stuff, the black mass, is being sent overseas for processing. So we're not getting the advantage of retaining those metals in Australia. And then kind of put over the top of that, the world scene, and where I would say Europe's leading in terms of setting very strong targets for collection, recycled content in new manufacture. We've got to do better. The economics are very much driven by the cobalt and the nickel at the moment, as you probably know. So that really means nobody's even paying much attention to the lithium and the other metals in there. But there was a quite modest study by a German group a few years ago that's put in 20% of the lithium supply coming from recycled content. And even that wasn't enough to get us past, the next 10, 15 years on those kind of projections that we all look at. It's a bit of a two-sided story, because if the demand's there and the prices go up, they'll find more lithium around the world, I'm sure of that. But it probably should be our target that there's a strong recycled content in the supply chain. So I think that's very, very important. And I think, the Europeans are going to lead us that way. We're going to have to label and those types of things, which will help out the recyclers as well, because basically they get a battery and I don't know what they're dealing with. So they kind of get treated as the lowest common denominator. The other thing for recycling that'll be a game changer is if somebody can work out the direct recycling, and you don't have to go back to, lithium and things like that with spending lots and lots of energy to get there.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions, actually, to all three, further up the hierarchy, reuse. What's the potential for reusing batteries? Maybe that could come out of the car and, they're somewhat plated, but still functioning. Is there an application in the mining sector for that? Is there other areas, Kate, that you may have seen? And Joe, it's you last again. What's your take on that? So actually, you, Jason, first.
Recycling. I guess from an energy perspective on the mining side, we don't really directly digging any sort of recycling in that sort of spectrum. However, the metals that we targeting for sale, like zinc, for example, with 30% of the zinc produced globally are recycled. That's what's called that. So we do treat it responsible one. We do want to extend this cover more minerals that can be safely used in the future. I guess from the other perspective, with our little shareholder back home in China, so they do introduce a whole value chain of from the resources into the raw material product, then come recycling. So our metals, our Schmidt shareholder has established the whole value chain pathway And given they have owned or affiliate with quite a few upstream business in China as well as manufacturing, own the salt water like in China, for example, to produce the batteries, and also the recycling business, which is trying to really strong out in different.
Yeah, so there's the recycling aspect, but there's reuse as well. As you
Yeah.
mentioned before, you alluded to second life batteries from electric vehicles. So a battery in an electric vehicle can't be used past 80% capacity. So once it drops to that level, we are looking at diagnostics to see the use of that battery, how it's being used, and the safety aspects around that, and then whether it would be suitable to use in a stationary storage application. Now a lot of, so you've got the Teslas of the world and BYDs and further providing stationary storage. I really think that the chemistry is going to move away from lithium. Lithium's here now, but it's most important because of the energy density to be used in mobility. I think it's not wasted, but it's not used to promote value in a stationary context. So as we move forward, recycling or repurposing or using those electric vehicle batteries for a second life, I think that's where we need to really focus. Want to say something on recycling?
I think
For reuse.
at the risk of kind of saying the thing, you know, the biggest advantage of reuse is that it delays recycling and gives us some time to get those technologies better than they are today. There's some startup companies in Victoria. So Re-Electrify is using a lithium-ion battery to build community business, they call it commercial they call it, stationary storage. So I totally agree with the fact that it's stationary storage is probably the target for reuse. You could get, if you can get a homogeneous enough supply of batteries, you can probably get to community scale. Offers some big challenges for the regulatory environment, and like even the whole business model, because the car companies, the EV guys aren't that keen at sharing the state of health information on the batteries, and we assume, or I assume, they've got it. And then that's the most expensive part, like the testing of the modules and the diagnostics down to the cell level is the most expensive part for whoever's going to go into that reuse. So hopefully we'll see some partnerships between the car companies and some of these people who get into the reuse, but you know, then there's all the warranty, some of the safety aspects that go with that. So it's a challenging area, but I think probably a little bit brave and make it happen.
And one of the challenges as well is the size, the space that you need. Yeah, so just an EV battery, that's great, that's big. To produce the same amount of power and energy, you need multiple of the subpar, the limited capacities. So it's, yeah, that's one of the challenges.
And also the performance continuity. So for operations, we cannot afford any breakdown, for example, backhaul truck and underground service. So instead of having that continuity, we make sure the substation is ready to charge batteries. And we all consider life cost of ownership. So what we're going to use at the end of the battery life, how we're going to reuse, and where to throw that away. And this is all one of the critical factors for mining companies considering the future.
Okay, well, that's fantastic that the panel just started bouncing off each other without even the. Now, we've got time for some questions from the audience, whether that's live or online potentially. I think we've got that facility. No, we don't. So is that right? So you're the only ones that can ask questions, and it's now your chance. Yes.
I might start the ball rolling. I do a lot of work with wind turbines. If I speak to them about what's holding up further development in the industry in Australia, the answer is grid, and grid. Is the answer, if you were to pinpoint sort of the one real roadblock to developing large-scale storage in Australia, what would it be? Without saying it's everything.
I assume this is a question to all panelists.
Yes, sorry.
You need a convener or a coordinator of it, because as it's been alluded to earlier, the states individually have been really innovative and progressive. Some of them, but particularly Victoria or South Australia. But you need an overarching coordination so that the particular manufacturing. I know Deakin is very progressive in the space, but there's also QUT and there's lots of different components. And I think if we had a coordinated approach, we would definitely accelerate the process.
To add on that, integration is one of the key for given the complexity from the internal into the infrastructure, grid connectivity, and regulatories. This is all one person, not the whole job. So the other thing for that one is cost. So we have done multiple models of driving the cost, and what will help us to build sustainable for the next 20 years. So the picture is like for us, the code is good to have, not must to have, given the current sensitivities. So they propose to approach.
I'd also add to that, batteries are the here and now, and they're particularly good with the intermittency issues. So the variable renewable energy sources like solar and wind, they can do those very quick power spikes and cover them and help with that integration into the grid.
Yeah, it's the key that I think when we speak to international solution providers in China, for example, so well in the battery standard package, right? Because infrastructure and grid are accessible, and I'm afraid now that big enough and have capacity work on Australia with the small capacity. Then I think that the regional regulatories are more conservative. Great, then they add quite a few complicated process and make sure or ensure that these lines will not hurting us by adding additional voltage to the grid.
Now, Edmo's been looking at virtual power plants, and I know that hasn't quite gone the way they forecast, but it kind of feels like that extra intermediary is probably like power plants an alternative, but it's not certainly not my field.
I think using the VBB, for example, Victorian Big Battery, to help stabilise the grid a bit, the virtual power plants, it's not necessarily batteries. You could use HVAC as a large flexible load also to feed into that.
Okay, so it's clear that storage is key to the transformation. Everybody agrees with that. And it's key that we have an opportunity here in Australia to grab more of the value chain. And it's also clear that this opportunity is significant. So those thoughts of mine, I want to go back to the audience again to see if there's some questions. Yes, we've got one here and one over the back after that.
Yeah, sure. So I know that batteries are the here and now, like this point, but the the technology and the use of the technology is rapidly advancing. So how do you ensure with that, you don't want to hamper the advance there, but how do you ensure safety, standardisation and collaboration across that to ensure we're all moving the same way in a safe manner?
Yeah, I think that is the challenge, and for the policymakers at one end and the regulators at the other end, right? That you create the environment that you get that kind of collaboration and advancement in the technology, but you keep us safe from ourselves at the other end. I think that's exactly the problem that faces, and the technology is changing so quickly. You couldn't write standards to keep up with it, right? And it's interesting. Sometimes when I have trouble sleeping, I've read a few standards and things out of the US, and you kind of think it's already out of date when it's published. So I don't have an answer. I think that's the challenge for us all.
Well, a collective effort sounds like a great go. So, question over there.
Question for Kate, but I guess for anyone. Kate, you mentioned, I was intrigued by what you were saying about stationary batteries and maybe new chemistries. I wonder if you could expand any more on that, about the sorts of things that we should be keeping our eyes open for the future. I'm not asking you to pick one necessarily, but just to speculate on some of those that are out there at the moment.
I don't think you can pick one. It's a combination of everything. And this challenge, the transformation, it's so massive. You've got to pick multiples to be able to reach the end goal. So I won't comment on a specific chemistry, but there's more than just lithium. Particularly when you look at flow and other batteries that are getting bigger.
I went to a briefing by a US firm in the last few weeks, who I'm not going to give them a plug because it's about us. But what they'd set up was like chemistry and geometry were two of the big things. How to select for your application the best combination. And I thought, I've had a very diverse background and, engineering at Melbourne's a huge field. It always seems, and I don't think it's just an Australian thing because I work for an American company and I saw it there too, like whenever there's a new technology, we all jump on it and we try to make it fit for every application. And then there seems to be, we get some education and some fingers burned out of that. And then there's kind of the pendulum swings the other way and we really, that is a great new technology, but it's best for data. And somehow, if there's a group of people out there that can accelerate that process of how we go from all loving a brand new technology and wanting to make it work for everything to, kind of letting it settle, understanding a bit about its strengths and weaknesses, and then going forward. But I would agree, I don't think lithium-ion batteries are going to be the chemistry of choice for stationary storage. But I would still say, whilst we've got lithium-ion batteries, to be able to reuse them. And we did some life cycle work at Melbourne, and we think you'd have to be able to use it for about 6 years in stationary storage for the environmental considerations to be, in your favour. But also give you that extra time for working out recycle or for Australia just to even have the volume to justify recycling.
Okay, do we have one more question?
There's one online.
Oh. I can't access the online question from where I am. Right, please put your questions in the chat and we'll try and get them in the second session. Anthony, you've got a question?
Yeah, apologies, Jess. Probably more for Kate and Joe. I'm with the Australia-China Business Council, and one, question I have, having heard from Mr. Yu from the Zhongwenchun Battery Alliance, was what's the dialogue within CSIRO or the university about re-engaging and going to China to learn from what has happened in China to bring back to influence some of the projects and policies here?
My personal opinion is that it goes both ways. And in research, it's really good because we're good at collaborating. But it's bringing like the business parties in as well. Yeah, we should be going to China and China should be coming here. To build out projects and collaborating. Because we can't do it individually, and collaboration is key to accelerate the process.
Yeah, my observation at Melbourne is it's never slowed down. And I mean, we have a lot of students whose, first nationality was Chinese, a lot of academics who have a Chinese heritage. And to me, I just see that collaboration going on all the time. Okay, it's subject to a new national interest test. I don't see it, so I've never seen it slow down. And, our vice chancellor's vocal about, getting students back and that type of thing. And people's best way.
Yeah.
Those things work.
Okay, I'm going to draw this first panel to a close. Sort of covering the space from mining to manufacturing. So could you please put your hands together for Jason, Frank and Joe? We're going to take a short break and then reconvene around about 20 to 4.
There we go. I can see.
Ladies, take a seat. Yes, second panel discussion. In just a minute. Thank you. And online attendees, thank you very much for taking a break and thank you for rejoining us and for the second discussion, which will be led again by Peter Hansford. Thank you, Peter.
So, more of me, but fortunately for you, some fresh panelists. Not at the last panel, but
We're fresh.
so we'll move straight to bringing the panelists up to the table, I think. So we've got joining us live, Anthony Coles and Ravenna Chen. And I think Nicholas is online, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So hopefully, Nicholas, you can hear us as we move into the second panel discussion, this time around consumers and the future of mobility.
I'm just checking if you can hear me.
Yeah, thank you. So just before we move into the panel session, just wanted to outline a little bit about Deakin Energy Networks and the 4 themes that we reckon are going to make a difference to the energy transition. First is workforce development. In my personal opinion, looming large as perhaps the major handbrake on the transition. We just don't have the talent available to move as quickly as we need to, and even perhaps as quickly as the targets are suggesting that we should. And so workforce development is going to require every shoulder to the wheel, be they TAFE, be they university, be they training organisation. We just need to do it a lot better. So that workforce development is one of those themes that I think is going to be critical. Technology, commercialisation, manufacturing, we heard a little bit about that last session. Thanks to our panellists, particularly Kate and Joe. But the industry accounts for a large proportion of emissions, and therefore they should be a key target in the transition in terms of what are the options available to them clean up their carbon act, and indeed contribute to the carbon abatement upstream of the economy. Minister D'Ambrosio, when I've heard her speak in the past, has often spoken about the 4Ds: decentralisation, the democratisation, and the decarbonisation of the energy system. And their fourth D is normally digitalisation. And we think at Beacon and others, I'm sure, in this room, see great opportunity in artificial intelligence, machine learning, the Internet of Things, and how data can actually enable us to design and build a better energy ecosystem in the future. So we see that as an important part of our strategy. And the fourth component is the human element, recognising that by and large, the technologies that already exist to enable much of the transition to occur. And what is lacking is, or what the problem is around people and the adoption and deployment and social licensing and community engagement and business models that deliver benefits. That part we haven't yet nailed either, and so that's not part of the strategy that we're working. But we're now moving into, as I said, consumers and the future of mobility. And some of you may know that there's a lady called Robin Denholm, who's actually the Australian-born chair of Elon Musk's Tesla, the world's biggest EV maker. And she says that we need to consider ourselves as part of that EV supply chain here in Australia. Internal combustion engine vehicles have a real challenge on their hands as they move from the old to the new technology. And in fact, engines is not, or no longer the competitive advantage that it used to be. It's now about electronics. And so we see the emergence of companies like Apple that are producing those vehicles from scratch. And you can only look on with a combination of awe and shock, probably, at Elon Musk and what has happened with Tesla. So I'll just make those comments as background comments before we get into the panel. And I thought we heard earlier about some of the Chinese companies, particularly BYD, that are active in EVs as well as battery storage. And picking up on Anthony's question earlier, Anthony, tell us a little bit, as much as you can at least, about the Chinese consumer and what's driving the enormous growth in electric vehicles that is being reported today.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks again to Virginia and Zach and Phoebe for organising today, Holding Redlich. So great to be here. Look, the challenging thing for Australia is the scale and the pace of change in China. And so with the EV today, it's as much an extension of your interaction with your phone and the app and the ecosystem. So we are aware of the Android and the Apple sort of competition there, operating systems. But in China over the last 10 years, there's been a massive development in their own mobile phone market and different players taking positions in that, from software development and application layers. And like when you're in a Tesla for a consumer experience, it's as much about you're suddenly really engaged with your power use. your the performance of your car, your range anxiety. Just as, I don't know whether you're like me, you have to plug in your phone to stay charged all the time, but it's the experience with the vehicle and brand that you're connected with, which is really important. And I don't think this is part of Australia's challenge in not having a poor manufacturing base, is that we're a net importer of all of those application layers of that consumer experience. The other challenging aspect for us and what we with the ACBC are trying to do through events like this is we want to be able to bring to the Australian market more knowledge about what is happening in China. And so there are brands like Xpeng, Neo, you mentioned BYD, Xiaomi, all of these brands. There's probably 300 EV brands, but companies like Neo are building and Xiaomi, whole home ecosystem. So your lifestyle and everything you're doing, from the automated vacuum cleaner in your apartment to the temperature of your car seat, is all part of your lifestyle. And where everyone's heard of the the developments of Alibaba and WeChat, and it's those accelerated take-up of those interactions and those experiences that we feel that we're missing out on a bit here. And it's not just the Gen X, Y, millennials, it's the right through to retirees and every age group. So I would use a term, the curiosity of the culture is more accelerated than our culture. There's a real eagerness for the freshness and newness of that digital experience.
That's great. That's a really great answer. So green is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Now I'm going to move to Ravenna, and Ravenna maybe talks through a little bit about Two-Star and what makes you interested and excited about batteries and electric vehicles from the ECIP. I know I was going to say tech nerd, I won't say that, but I know that you're very keen on technology, so maybe you can give us a bit of a perspective from the ECIP.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, and also appreciate ACBC invite us today. And maybe I'll give a little bit of background about our group. So Holding actually originated from the Tsinghua University. It's also the top one university in China. We are quite focused on the deep tech, so it's science and technology. So currently, we're one of the biggest technology service group in China. Also maybe around the world as well, which is currently we've got more than 300 hubs over the world, across Australia, China mainland, of course, South Asia, American, UK, even Russian or like Luxembourg, Europe, or maybe even in Africa. So that's how we expanded for the past 29 years. And we are quite focused on the Two-Star is a company under the Holding, and we are quite focused on the deep tech incubation, accelerator, and also the early stage investments. And for Holding ourselves, we also have the industry party, like for example, we've got the task engineering, task development, which is quite focused on the green. And we do have the research, we do have the commercialized part, and we do have IPO company environments is on our holding group too, which is
how many employees across the whole company? Have you got any idea? That's always an impressive number.
Yeah, actually, the staff maybe more than 3,000 around the different country together.
Okay.
And we have a lot of collaboration with top universities like Cambridge, like Alberta, and like UNSW, and we're happy to find more partners in Victoria as well.
Mm-hmm.
And with local governments, like Singapore with NPA, China with defense, province too, and also local industry, like just you mentioned the BYD established the EV manufacturers, which is the last year is happening in Thailand. And this established the EV factory in the WH Industry Park, which establishes our local shareholder. So we will bring the CEO of BYD to go to Thailand at this March to have more research and also more coverage and talk as well.
Okay. So, if you were the CEO of Two Star.
I'm CEO of Asia Pacific.
No, but if you're a very big boss, what particular areas of the battery storage, EV ecosystem would you be wanting to look more closely at?
This is more like if you're the biggest CEO, right? You still want to close that podcast also, based on the group's ability. But for our own self, like I remember Dr. Yu mentioned previously that we got a lot of demand from the illuminate, the main material for battery. So actually, I think also last year or the year before last year, we also have the technology getting the illuminate from the salt lake in Xinhai, Yanbu, which is that is a very important and significant research in China. We can get the cost like 4 times cheaper. And after we announced that technology, we got a lot of demand from Germany and Russia as well.
Right.
Yeah, so that is something we do previously. And we also invested in the one company, they are provided the material for battery for Tesla. So that is also the part we are investment. So for our own self, we might be more focused on the like how to charge it faster, which is one of the big problem maybe everybody faces. And I think I talked to some entrepreneurs here mentioned about they're building the charging station for car, which is modified the current charging station. This is also we get a requirement from Singapore government. Like we can tell this the country is quite limited for space, so they cannot like build another charging station in those cities. They prefer to modify the one they currently have, like maybe transfer into the charging and to go to another site. And the format of you, at least from China side, government is super support about like EV cars development or this kind of industry development. I can say from demand party or the supply side. For demand side, I think majority of the times actually they start to driving the electricity car. The reason also because in the beginning, everybody who wants to purchase electricity car, they can get 50,000 from the government paid that year, which is 7,000 AUD converts, which is people will be demand more. And also like the car license plans lottery, like when we back to if we drive the traditional car, example like Beijing or Shenzhen, you might be waiting for the license plans for years. But if you buy the electricity car, you can get your license in 1 month or 2 months,
Right.
which is that is force people to change the traditional car or petrol car convert to the electricity car. And also taxi driver, like I have Australian friends go to China with me in 2019, just before the COVID. And the last time he been in China is like 15 years ago. He's super surprised because when we landed in airport, all the taxi is electricity car, like no one is battery car. But I mean, because of Shenzhen, but also they have a lot of safety. They might be not so high, like Dr. Yu mentioned, like 20%. But China is so big, so 20% already very, very a lot are changed to EV car already. And then for supply parts, we do have investment in the deep tech or this kind of factories. So we got a lot of support from different local governments to support if you want building the EV car manufacturers or if you are one of the supply chains, government happy to provide the grants and also the like a market access as well. And also maybe we're back to the what is most powerful for government is regulation. So they are start to have a lot of regulation modified based on what we are developing now. Like we are investment one of the auto driving laser car and we are get approved to test them in our own test park for years, and we can use that data to approve and to like to give our advice, to give our experience to report to government, so they will be considered in the new regulation for this industry. So I'm feeling they're kind of support about that.
Sounds like there's a lot of support.
Yeah.
And your office is in Melbourne? Your Australian office?
To be honest, not yet.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, so we are happy.
That's what we're here.
Yeah.
We can claim this as one success already if we get to sign on the dotted line.
Well, quickly, I know Virginia will do it later, that we, ACBC produced a report last year, which is exactly what this is all about. And there's a chapter focused on mobility. And we interviewed actually Charge Fox CEO Tim Washington as part of that. And one of his key insights that's in the report is that there's so much learning to share. So yes, it's going to be great to be able to get up there and experience it, but there is an openness and a willingness to collaborate and for us to look at ways that, as was mentioned in the previous session, how do we accelerate where we're at and what our strengths are, and how we can participate from a personal perspective, having done the deep dive and the research in a number of 6 different industry sectors. The scale of the industrial transformation is so big, most people can't appreciate how much has to happen, how much new renewable generation, solar PV, wind, hydrogen, storage. There is so much opportunity for Australia within not just its domestic market transition, but within our region and in the globe. We really need to see this as a green economy opportunity. And your comment before, a question about the policy settings and the drive for our conviction to participate in that. I think we've got a position for this program which is about net zero faster together, and we feel that if you want to build a factory fast, who should you reach out to? And I think, you know, Charge Fox again, a very good example of collaboration.
Well, Anthony, thank you for those further comments and also for stealing my segue. Because I was going to bring Nicholas into the story now, because we've been talking about EVs and recharging, and recharging is obviously critical to the take-up of electric vehicles. So perhaps, Nicholas, give you an opportunity firstly to talk a little bit about Charge Fox and how prominent you are in the Australian market. And then as a follow-up question, talking about some of the challenges of integrating EVs and charging stations into the energy system. So over to you. Tell us a bit about Charge Fox.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I was going to just start off by saying I think it's commonly accepted that Australia is really lagging behind the rest of the world when it comes to the adoption of EVs. And you can see really, really large uptakes in many, many other countries ahead of us. And there's a real perception, however, that this is now starting to change, and it's really going to change very, very rapidly, in much the same way that we saw the uptake of solar take off at a very, very rapid pace here in Australia. There's a couple of reasons why there's been such a slow uptake. One is that there's been a perceived price of EVs compared to petrol and diesel cars has always been still quite high, and but we're starting to see that change already, and they're falling, and they're starting to getting close to reach parity with petrol and diesel, and especially when you factor in the running costs. Another big barrier has been the charging network, and the fact that a lot of drivers didn't feel confident that they could charge in public when they were out and about. So this is the kind of thing that Charge Fox is trying to address, and that's also changing as well. One of the big factors for changing changing this is that we're starting to see a lot of support now from the state governments and this current federal government. They're getting right behind EVs. They're providing incentives and subsidies and all kinds of encouragements to the industry. They're also doing this for renewables as well, as we know. So these two things go hand in hand. ChargeFox itself, we are a software platform for EV charging. And we ourselves own and operate 22 ultra rapid sites. So these are invariably, they're on the highways linking the cities. And as I say, we own and operate them, but we also provide our platform to other charge point operators. And in fact, we've now got something like well over 600 chargers under our management that are owned by other people. And this is 400 sites, and we've got something like 800 different organizations that have accounts with us. So our platform really is there to be provided to those people that are putting chargers in. And those kinds of organizations are incredibly diverse. They can be councils, they can be tourist destinations, they can be shopping centers, they can be we've got several large network operators themselves. And we also support these network operators with driver services. So we have the ChargeFox app, which is available on Google and Android here in Australia. It's free to download for drivers, and they will set up an account and put their own credit card details in there. And some of the ways that we support the charge point operators is the software platform will give them visibility. So their chargers will appear in the ChargeFox app, and they will also appear in other mapping services such as Google, PlugShare, in-car navigations, etc. So in other words, their chargers become very visible to drivers. But we also provide them with a dashboard where they can log in and see their chargers, and they get all kinds of statistics around how their chargers are being used, how often they're being used, how much energy is being used through the chargers, how much revenue they're earning, etc. We also provide.
Sorry, I understand exactly where you're coming from in terms of being software platform and enabler of the uptake. I'm going to move you on to the second part of the question, if you don't mind,
Sure.
which is
Yep.
how all the data that you're gathering and the information you're providing to drivers, fleet owners, etc., is that also helping in terms of the integration of EVs into the energy market? You know, is it enabling the battery on wheels, if you like?
Yeah, well, look, I guess at the moment our focus has been on what we call B2B, in that we're working with companies that put chargers in that make them public. We're working with fleet operators, etc. At the moment, software isn't being provided in the home. Now, usually a person that buys a car, they'll then install a charger at home very often. They just rock up, they plug in and they charge. They don't really at this point have much use for software. However, we can see things that are coming down the horizon really rapidly. So number one, vehicle to grid, and also vehicle to home. These kinds of programs are all under trial at the moment. There's lots of projects, arena funded projects and pilots and trials that are going on that are testing this thing. So what we can see is an eventual circumstance where everybody's EV can then start to become part of the grid through these mechanisms. They can become part of virtual power plants, and the homeowner will be incentivized by the retailers to join. This is a real game changer and very exciting. But as I say, right now we still consider that to be in the test and learn phase.
Right. Okay. I'm going to quickly now jump to Anthony and Ravenna, because I may have different observations from the other half of this audience, the Chinese half of the audience, at least. What's happening in terms of integration of EVs into the grid, the batteries on wheels, the vehicle to grid, vehicle to home? Andrew, you want to go first?
Yeah, look, and I think this is the key, one of the key learnings that we're going to focus on this year with ACBC. We did a MOU partnership with a group called the Association of Green Industrial Parks in China. And this is under the Ministry of Commerce, and it's 25% of China's GDP goes through economic development zones or industrial parks. And these parks are accelerated industry development. And so I've been to ANU's vehicle to grid testing station, and it's one lonely, poor little unit on the side of the wall, whereas in China it is a city. So basically, an area the size of Melbourne CBD is defined as an economic development zone, an industrial zone, and within that zone are permissions for, as Ravenna mentioned before, they're key policy levers around demand side development and supply side development. I will jump to hydrogen at the moment. So that just happened with the Beijing Olympics. And what they did was said, the Olympics is going to be here in X year's time. This is the region. We are going to support the development of hydrogen refueling stations, hydrogen electrolyzers, storage and distribution. But we're also over this side, we're going to talk to the bus manufacturers, the fuel cell manufacturers, and say, well, we need vehicles to use that. So Australia's dilemma at the moment, whether it's in EVs, charging stations, EV uptake, is that there's no market. There's no defined, confident market demand. We're still caught at a state-based scenario of incentivising the purchasing of EVs. And I think you'll see from the stats is we got a few thousand sold last year. I think Mr. Yu mentioned 10 million sold last year. So we can't just plod along. We need to accelerate that. And I feel that these economic development zones need to be a state-based decision around not just a renewable energy zone, but an economic development zone. So what are the supply chain elements that need to be brought together to improve Australia's, accelerate Australia's participation in this? We can be competitive. It's not about being too small, too expensive, but it's the experience like companies like Charge Fox and Jet Charge was they went out and created a market and they saw a gap, but we need to accelerate that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Ravenna, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, a little bit based on what Nicholas also mentioned about how expensive the EV car is, quite like similar price of the petrol car. I have a very interesting fact I want to share is we have a car, it's a mini EV. The Chinese name is Guang. So actually that is they're selling 4 million cars during 2021, which is big. There's big BYD. So they are the biggest like a top one sales based on the markets of scale up. And their selling price start from the 30,000 RMB, which is around the 6,000 AUD. So I think that's affordable price.
Yes.
For majority of wanting to just have a vehicle to like go to office, back to home, like we're not consider like long driving, especially for EV car, mainly still using like the safety inside driving. People still use it a lot for like a long trip. So that is quite affordable and also quite cute as well because you can customize the service as what you want. Like if I like Mickey Mouse, I can just make my so I think there's a lot of demand from the market.
I have the airbags for it.
Not enough big green.
So it's how the fact we can say actually electricity car can be cheaper. It depends on how the supply chain is strong. For example, because if you want to sell it so cheap, you need to have the big demand. Then even you deduct a little bit of profit margin, you still can be profitable. But if you don't have such big market, of course, you are afraid to be covered the cost because you need to build the whole new supply chain or manufacturing to build something you never did previously, and you cannot do it from the existing traditional car factory. You have to build a new one. So that is about the price and about the integration or like how to plug in together. When we're talking about the EV car, maybe not only about the green technology like hydrogen, like the battery. Maybe this is one part. Another part also considered about smart car, smart vehicle, like some cars come to you automatic and maybe self-driving model become more popular recently as well. I do believe they still have some problem and people do have accidents from it. But compared with the person who is getting benefits from it, the accident might still lower. But we still need to make the accident is zero, not lower is not enough yet. So for this part, sharing another study we have with Yutong bars. So Yutong, they are the shuttle bars or like the China cities, the transportation bars. So with collaboration with them and also get support from the Zhengzhou government, we have one space where do research about the smart vehicle industry research center, which is we got the modules of people who have the software want to integrate it to the hardware to testing, how the software going or how the security, how safe they can use that model to do. And also same time in that industry part, we have a lot of shuttle buses, nobody automatic driving this kind of things. Also happy to welcome you guys to visit that industrial park. It's quite like another word.
That sounds like one of the things that's missing here is we don't have a clear narrative or even strategy, not as yet around batteries or EVs in terms of, other than the uptake, in terms of how and where Australia might participate along the supply chain. So I was going to delve into that just briefly before I put questions to the audience as well. So once upon a time, not that long ago, we actually had a car industry here. Some of the audience may not know that, but it's true. And there's still, in fact, something like 2,500 people employed at the Broadmeadows site, and certainly a lot of advanced manufacturing expertise still in places like Geelong and Dandenong and in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. So my question to you firstly, Nicholas, because you've been left out a little bit because you're online, but here's a question for you. And maybe outside your area of expertise a little bit, but again, like with batteries, are we dreaming that Australia can in fact be much more engaged in the manufacture of electric vehicles moving forward? So that's the question I have for each of the panelists, and then I'm going to go to questions from the audience. So starting off with you, Nick, it's not about charging necessarily, but charging is part of the supply chain or the supporting infrastructure as well. Where are some of the best opportunities for Australia to participate in the EV supply chain?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it was disappointing when our car manufacturing industry did cease in Australia, but it would be fantastic if we could encourage electric vehicle manufacture here in this country. Now, there are a couple of really small startups that are dabbling in this. People like Ace Motors, SEA are a bit of a success story in that they're doing conversions of drivetrains, and there's a few people working on conversions of old petrol and diesel cars, but it's not really a fully fledged manufacturing industry. Now that's going to take massive investment and commitment, but of course it's outside of my expertise, Peter, as you said, but it would be fabulous if we could see that happening here. We did see a small example of what could happen where we have a homegrown charger manufacturer called Tritium. And so most of the chargers are manufactured overseas, but Tritium was a homegrown brand, and they've become a massive global success story. They're now huge all over the world, and they floated on the New York Stock Exchange. And so you can imagine that kind of success translating to EV manufacture.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there. But thank you very much for that answer. And particularly so because, as you said, outside of your area of expertise. So I'm just going to get a quick response also from Ravenna and Anthony. And then if there's any questions from the floor, we'll take those and then we'll wrap up.
So for this one, I think it's also quite interesting to think, because I feel when we talk about collaboration or the chance, actually we're not talking about the one country's chance. It's more like how we do collaboration globally. Like we don't need to like we're trying to help this technology, we have to be help technology necessary, which is this not we call it the that's kind of like a super difficult technology, which is for this part, I feel like Australia have a lot of resource, and they have a lot of money. They got the illuminate, which is export a lot to other countries, and maybe China already have some existing technology or research done, which is we can just technology transfer or buy or collaboration together to make the whole manufacturing established process faster. At the same time, I also feel like actually Australia is one of the countries have very high research base. Like here have the world's class top universities and have the world's like the top scientific. But this have a gap between the commercialized and research. But this part also hard to do in Australia because the market here is quite small. And also same time maybe government already provide a lot of grants. But one side is government grant, another side is this idea, this application to really can make money for commercialized part. So it means they need a big market to see or go. So which is I feel the neighborhood, South Asia, and the China maybe can be the good partner to partner with the commercialized side. Like for example, we have some research and we want to testing it. Okay, and then we go like this kind of country, get this kind of testing, and we get the data back, we get the regulation here, we get the approval here. So we're still made in Australia when they face to whole world, but they got easy to get the data, get the law. And we're also feeling like the labor here is quite high, no matter from the salary, from the working time, everything, which is that part also we got maybe cheaper things in other countries, which is we can collaboration wise.
Okay.
Yeah, that is I feeling that is the parts maybe Australia played a very important role for the research side. And also same time I get some comments last year after we joined the Impact Access Summit, and I have a few like 3 to 4 companies looking for us to because they already got the research center here and they get the grants, they get support from local government as well. But which is the supply chain is much more complicated and also cheaper. So they want to get a supply chain from them and they get to rebuild and innovation here. Then from here goes the works.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive.
And I know I'm eating my own clothing, so your question was, are we dreaming as a country to think that we can participate in the manufacturing? BYD stands for Build Your Dreams. So there was someone who 10 years ago didn't have an industry, didn't have a business, didn't have a global company and or a few $1 billion. So what is needed are the signals. There is no doubt that I'll bring this back, and the reason I wanted Ravenna to come to Victoria, this is the sporting capital. The culture is competitiveness and drive. And I feel that the drive that Victoria has demonstrated in the past in different industries and aligning all of these elements is where the capability is. And it's not, you need $1 billion ticket to think about it. So I can promise you that probably the mother or father of a few students in Melbourne that have that in their bank account, but there's no signals here as to why to do it. It doesn't take much these days, as Ravenna mentioned. They're hosting BYD in Thailand, they're building a factory in the industrial park because the signals have been there. We have the lithium, we could be building the cathodes, the anodes, the assembly for the cells. We could bring in automated assembly plant for an EV, for a skateboard frame. Photon Mobility, a local bus company, is already doing that in the bus sector for electric buses and some hydrogen. What we don't have is the commitment, as the Minister mentioned before, there's 2035, 2040 for conversion of fleets. If you bring those signals forward, suddenly you've got an industry. And on the competition note, I just want to highlight that Indonesia was a customer market potential of ours of 250 odd million people. Their president just stood up at the B20 last year and said, we're building here. So that's the biggest coal exporting competitor to Australia, suddenly flipping the switch to be an EV, a battery manufacturer, an EV manufacturer. So if that's not a signal that we're almost too late, we can't survive on our domestic market. As Ravenna said, we need to integrate supply chains, but we need to move fast.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got about 2 minutes before drinks is due. Do you want to wrap up still, Anthony, or do you want me to?
I have a cell dog.
Right, okay. Well, just before you do that then, I'd like to give the first person to put their hand up, if there is one, a chance to ask a question from the floor, and we'll get a quick response from the person that I choose most appropriate to answer it. Okay.
So my company is a EV manufacturing company based in Australia. Obviously looking to build new commercial vehicles within Australia. So my question is, as you said, obviously Holden, Ford, and all those sorts of companies are exiting Australia, as you know, labour costs and all of these challenges that arise. What do you think is a driving factor for Australia to attract investment and also talent back to sort of revitalise this industry?
You're the investor.
Our company, yes.
Okay, Rebecca, you've got about a minute.
So I think that part is quite interesting. Like actually, when we do investments, we also collaborate with local governments. For example, we got one site in Shenzhen government, which is Shenzhen government put 1 billion and the Tasmania put 1 billion. So we got a 2 billion fund there, which means we can investment in different, like a certain industry government wants to development. And at the same time, like the talent parts, I do believe we have a lot of high talent, which is they are as Australian, either they are like who is studying here and stay here, because Australia, one of the country, have a lot of people immigration here and they're all the high talent. So for this part, like what talent do we know? They're not only how the research academic, but also the life. For example, like maybe this part is kind of doing very badly, but we still have one thing in Changsha. So when talent is being there, we provide the talent accommodation, we have the professional team to take care of the big data, children's school problem, which is all the small details, but make the talent feeling, okay, this is my home, especially for foreigner. So this is also the way to attract around the world, but which is Australia doing super good in this part. Right? I'm quite impressed about how Australia treated the talent and treated the people who want to come in here and stay here. And also related to the investments, like even especially for us, like when YC, when a lot of big investor, they can get a lot of investment return in very short time. Also because their application, their software, their internet things. But for us, we need to suffer for longer. Like usually it's 5 to 8 years. We can have something. Okay, finally this one got faster. Finally this one we got some application data is going well. But at the same time, we need somebody passionate like us or like some other deep tech investors passionate enough to waiting for this kind of technology virtual. And we need somebody like industrial cooperator to willing to provide the chance to all the entrepreneurs or startup or like good technology companies to testing them products in application and on commercial market, like a consumer market.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank all the panelists that have joined us today. From the first session, Kate and Joe and Jason and Anthony, Nick and Ravenna, and particularly so for providing nice full explanations of the points that I put to you. Made my job a lot easier to cover off 90 minutes of panel discussion. So I'd like to thank you all for doing that. And my takeout is that almost anything's possible because we have some real fundamentals here that are so attractive. What we need to work on is making better connections, and that includes potentially, to pick up your point, Elena, getting companies like your own to engage with the university sector, where the talent can be found. Let's not forget that solar panels probably first originated at the University of New South Wales. We have lots of other hidden gems, I can tell you, across the university ecosystem that are going to be really powerful in the transition. So I'd like to thank ACBC for inviting me from Deakin to facilitate these sessions, and I'd like to ask you again to put your hands together for all the panelists that joined us today. Anthony, it's ready to wrap up?
Yes.
60 seconds.
Good luck to you.
How's our online? Oh, I can't see it.
Party.
Time to go. Look, I'm here with my Australian China Business Council National Board hat on. We did a review last year, or actually 2021 now, where we looked at obviously the geopolitics, the disengagement from Australia with China, and the economic changes that were happening in China. So the Green Channel program was an initiative, a platform to identify the economic opportunities for Australia from greater collaboration with China on the climate challenge. It's not a science on climate science, it's about economics in industry sectors. And so the two areas that you see there, insights and action, are the platform focus. So the first step for insights was this report, which I encourage you to go to the ACBC website and download. 6 industry sectors that we did a really deep dive into, both the China side policy developments and in Australia, and exactly this discussion that we're having today. So there's a Chinese version too, for anyone still left online. Dr. Hao, thank you for being here. What we've also done, thanks to the funding from the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, is take some of that content into a conversation through our podcast. So again, depending on how quick you are with your camera, if you can scan that little QR code there, it's just going to take you to the website for where you can either go your Apple or your Spotify's or your podcasts. Yes, there's a fantastic chapter there. We actually interviewed Neil Wong from Photon Mobility, who's got some tremendous experience with Yutong buses, as well as his own company now in Australia. The key point that both Tim Washington from Charles Fox and Neil made was there's a huge industry in education training around the new industries of this green technology. So it's not just technology manufacturing. The other thing that we're working on the action side is really showcasing, like Jason mentioned before, the Chinese parent company has investments in Australia, but all of these companies, he was probably underselling his parent company a bit, massive commitment to decarbonise, massive commitment. And in Australia, they are looking for collaboration with local partners on projects. So we've partnered with the China Chamber of Commerce in Australia and talking about creating a database This map's actually stolen from an arena map of the renewable sites, but what we're wanting to do is invite ACBC members and non-members particularly to reach out to us to submit your collaboration project so that we can start to showcase all the good work that's been done together to drive towards net zero faster. The other relationship I mentioned was this association of green industrial parks, and we're going to be activating. I'm heading up to China in March to work on a number of cross-border inbound and outbound delegation. They've done a huge amount of research on what these parks have been doing for the last 5 years about managing inputs and outputs and economic development and environmental impacts. So I flagged the development in China is towards inbound investment, and if you're going to invest in China, they're going to need to be in one of these industrial parks, and you're going to have to meet the environmental requirements for what your product is producing. So they've been working very closely with the EU on all of this. So again, to wrap up, I think that goes to your slides. Thank you again. Please, I'll do the please join. Please help ACBC with this initiative and support Virginia and her team here with the next event. Thank you.
Between you and a drink, this will take 30 seconds, so thank you very much. Look, a big thank you to all our speakers, and you know who they are, so I won't name them all, but especially Peter. Thanks for doing such a great job moderating. Really appreciate that. Thank you to the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, Holding Redlich and Qing Communications for your ongoing and highly valued support. And of course, our small but highly efficient team, Zach and Freddie, who's somewhere, probably there we go. Thank you both so much for your hard work in bringing this event together. Thank you. We really appreciate it. To our online audience, thank you for joining us today and persevering and staying on board. We look forward to welcoming you back at another ACBC event in the near future, and hopefully to meeting you in person, and hopefully you joining at ACBC. That would be great. To those in the room, we'll now move next door for some light refreshment and some important networking. And I again offer our sincere thanks to Holding Redlich for your kind hospitality. Thank you all for attending in Melbourne and online, and a very good afternoon or good evening. Thank you.